Other than attaching your camera to a microscope or using reversal rings, there are two easy ways you can create highly magnified close-up images. One is to use a dedicated macro lens, and the other, much less expensive way, is to use extension tubes to convert your ordinary lenses into a macro-capable lens. In this video, we're going to find out which works best and why. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Use coupon code CARL to get a 10% discount. So for this test, I decided to compare the Sony 90mm 2.8 macro G lens against two bargain basement extension tubes on a standard Sony 50mm 1.8 lens, and the medium format Hasselblad 120mm dedicated macro lens against my 100mm lens with extension tubes added. First of all, let's explain what extension tubes are. Extension tubes are essentially relatively inexpensive spacers that move your lens further away from the recording medium. In doing so, the image circle becomes bigger, providing more magnification, and because of the shift, it can now be focused on very close objects. However, the lens loses its ability to focus at further distances when you have the extension tubes in place. These things are relatively inexpensive because they have no glass. They are literally just spacers. Dedicated macro lenses, on the other hand, are lenses that can focus from infinity to extremely close, which means that lenses like a 90mm macro can also be effective portrait or product photography lenses because of their focal length being in the sweet spot for the relative subject size to perspective based on the shooting distance. But is there much difference between using a $1,000 dedicated macro lens against a $200 standard lens with a $75 set of extension tubes? Let's find out. 50mm standard lens, 1.8, with two extension tubes. $90mm macro lens. This is one of the highest quality prime lenses in the Hasselblad range, the 100mm, which I use for a lot of work, and I've got two extension tubes added onto it. You may notice at f22 diffraction starts to become a problem and the image softens. Here at f45
diffraction is now a major problem for the 100 megapixel sensor, causing the image to soften at f45. The extension tubes with the 100mm lens could only go to f32. Just for fun, we decided to take the 100 megapixel Hasselblad, the 120mm macro lens, and combine it with all the extension tubes to see how much magnification we could achieve.
So clearly from those results, the actual macro lenses have much better flat field performance. We see the extension tubes blurring quite severely in the corners at the same larger aperture settings. However, as we close the aperture down to f8 and smaller, we clearly see much better performance from the extension tubes as depth of field helps bring those blurry corners sharp. By the time we hit f22 and smaller, there isn't a huge amount between them, but the macro still has the edge in terms of contrast and detail. Personally, I really love a good dedicated macro lens, but I still find extension tubes very useful. For example, with much of my product photography work, I like to get my camera physically closer to the product, with the product still fitting in the frame. To do this, I need a shorter focal length, like 50 or an 80mm. And if there is no dedicated macro lens in that focal length range, then I can achieve macro level results with extension tubes. Finally, on many of my detailed product shots, I'm shooting several images at f11 in a focus stack to gain maximum depth of field. And in doing so, the reduced corner sharpness of using extension tubes is eliminated during the focus stack. If you'd like to watch some of the techniques used for these highly detailed product images for focus stacking, lighting, and concept creation, then go to carltayloreducation.com and jump right in. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks very much for watching.
This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Carl to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.